Good evening, everyone. I think we'll get underway as I see there's a few of us waiting to get started. So welcome to the DevOps-Exchange July 2020. Oh, sorry. I'm Jack. So I lead the Contracts and European Division of Linux Recruit. A few of you would recognize me if you're from Barcelona, as I run the event there too. So good to see you guys. So the DevOps group, run 4 events through the UK and 1 in Barcelona. Normally we would do 1 event per location per month. However, obviously with the whole mess we've all gone through recently, we've all come together and we're doing 2 virtual events a month just to keep things ticking over, because we're all still very interested in DevOps and how things are going on, and we weren't going to leave that behind. Hopefully we can get back soon to meeting in person. But for the near future, we will stay virtual, but we'll all appreciate it when there's some free beer and pizza to come. You can tweet us at the Docs Hub, or on Twitter, sorry, or if you're tweeting about something, you can tweet us at #Docs. Importantly, we have a DevOps-Exchange YouTube channel. So we've got talks from dating back years now. So if you want to go on there, you can have a look at all previous events, and the 3 talks from tonight will very shortly be put on the YouTube channel afterwards as well. So tonight, we may have to be a bit creative with the order, because I think Aimee's running a little bit late, unless she's here in the next couple of minutes. First up would be Aimee.
I'm here.
Oh, Aimee is here, fantastic. Great, so we don't have to be creative at all. So first up will be Aimee from S&P Global. She's talking about difficult DevOps decisions, followed by Carlos from Nutmeg. He's going to be educating us on Grafana 7. And last but not least, we're going to have Mika from Smarkets. And he's going to be giving a talk on turning audit pains to operating pleasures. Throughout the event, you'll see a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Ask any questions you want to the speakers. At the end of each talk, we'll ask a couple of questions, maybe more depending on time. Don't fear though if your question hasn't been answered, because the Q&A stays running. So your answer can be, your question can be answered by the speaker on the chat function afterwards as well. So keep the questions coming. So this is definitely a community-driven event. We don't want to make it about recruitment at all, but with that being said, as it says, we are Linux Recruits. We're the sponsors of this event. Just a quick message. So if you are looking for a new job, or your company's going through a period where they're hiring and there's some tough to fill hires and you need some help, do come and contact me or one of my colleagues, because I think we're pretty good at what we do as well. And finally, if you're going through an interesting transformation in your company, or you just want to talk about your DevOps journey personally, do get in touch, because we're always looking for more speakers. So our next event's actually on July 23rd. As I said, we're doing 2 a month. So get in touch on hello@devops-exchange.io. But the chances are you've probably spoken to me or one of my colleagues in the past, so you can just drop us a quick email or call us, and we can sort you out talking in the future. Right, so I'll stop sharing now. And Aimee, do you want to share your screen? And first up is Aimee talking about difficult DevOps decisions.
Great, thank you. And thank you for inviting me here today. I'm excited to be here and share with you a little bit about what I do for DevOps. I'm very passionate about DevOps, and I have been practicing DevOps since around 2013. And once I put in my first pipeline, I was hooked. Like most people, I got to see the benefits. I got to see people that I worked with for many years get nights and weekends back. And from there, I took it and I grew and developed into a DevOps transformational leader, is what I would consider myself, or a DevOps strategist. And to give you context, I mostly work with large enterprise organizations looking to adopt DevOps. And I often hear, we want to compete with startups, and we want to have like a startup culture, and we want to be DevOps. And a lot of times it means something very different. And as I work with these enterprises and these organizations, I help them make some of the difficult decisions and develop that strategy, and then shift that strategy into a tactical or executable plan. This is the first time I have done this talk and have put this together. So you're seeing a beta version. And what I would really like is feedback. What resonated? Where do you wish that I went in deeper? What didn't you understand and I need to be clearer about? I would love that feedback. So I appreciate you being sort of a test audience. One of the first decisions that I see companies and organizations struggle with is, or let's do that. Are we going to do this? Are we going to become a DevOps organization? And everybody, they all want the pipeline, right? Everybody wants CI/CD and they want to put in that tool chain, but they really don't think about what it means to really adopt the culture part, to change team topologies, to get the skill sets in, decide whether you're going in on the cloud. And these are some of the questions that in conversations when I'm talking to these organizations, as to whether they're making that decision. Disruption being one of the biggest ones. They are threatened by startups, or potentially they're just disrupting themselves. I work at S&P Global. I'm the head of DevOps and Cloud Engineering Enablement. And there's businesses within S&P that there's such a high bar for entry in stock indexes and ratings that they don't necessarily have to be DevOps because the competition really can't beat them right now. You have to have funding. You have to have really strong change leadership. You have to be risk tolerant and accept some of the risks that you're going to take and that you might fail at some points and make some bad decisions. You have to slow down to go fast. I don't think a lot of people realize that in order to put pipelines in, you have to sort of throttle back on feature development. You have to be an organization that can be patient and persevere. I've seen teams or departments within side just bail because they felt once they hit the bottom of the J curve of change, it was wrong and they couldn't push through. Are you in a burnout environment? People work in multiple hours where if you put a CI/CD pipeline in and you changed your teams and your culture, that they would be able to get value added time back and focus on just innovation. Agile practices. I think a lot of companies haven't matured their agile practices and then wonder why when they adopt DevOps and the people, the process, and the technologies, why it's not working. That I think is foundational. So these are some of the questions they get asked, and rightfully so, because when you're a legacy company or you've been working in with a lot of legacy systems and you have old ways of working and you have what I consider like lots of acquisitions that have made things even more complicated, we're asking these people, our people, to change everything they know about how software is developed, delivered, and operated. And that's a big undertaking. And I'm not sure a lot of companies understand, depending on the size and the magnitude, that's what they're signing up for. One of the things I ask is, why do you want to do this? Know your purpose, and that always have that at the forefront of it helps you sustain that course and path. I've worked at 3 significantly large companies leading DevOps adoptions and transformations. One of them, they were one of the top companies to work for. Fortune magazine made the top 100 list. It was a federally funded quasi-government organization. They had no competition. They weren't looking to disrupt. They really weren't looking to be a startup feel, but they wanted to live up to the reputation and reduce burnout. And they put in DevOps and eliminated the silos between Dev and Ops just for the humaneness. Like we call it humane IT. It's one of the reasons why I do DevOps. The second one, big financial company, had to disrupt. They were always going to be at risk of disruption, and they wanted to be able to innovate and keep pace and outpace the market. And then finally, some organization that just wanted to disrupt themselves, be more efficient, move faster, and felt that a DevOps culture would reduce silos, handoffs, and make it a better, more well-managed organization and reduce waste. People strategy. One of the first things we start talking about is who's going to help us? How are we going to do this? Do we use consultants and hire outside people from the market, hired outside talent? Do we convert existing talent, or do we do all of the above? The answer is all of the above. You use a combination of professional services, hiring people from the outside, and upskilling your existing talent. The reason why I like to see, or how I like to see companies use For some reason, not even touching my keyboard, but it's auto advancing. I'm not sure why. Professional services. I just even put in a statement of work for where I am right now. Bring an outside organization to come in and do an assessment, do the strategy and plan, and then use some of their expertise to start with a seed team that you co-create, and they bring a coach, and then that jump starts at least one team that you can use that will pay it forward with other teams within the organization. And then hire people from the outside, but for a master apprentice. I talk about establishing that seed team where you have a mix of masters that take the coach from the outside, a mix of masters that you've hired from the outside, and some apprentices and people that are converting and want to do this from within side. And then upskilling, individual learning paths, team immersions and challenges. So I say team immersions and challenges. One of my favorite models, if you're familiar with a dojo, is what I've seen be most effective for getting teams into the DevOps mindset and practices and behaviors, is running a dedicated focus challenge for at least 6 weeks, where they're ring fenced and not competing with other priorities. And that's all they focus on is their DevOps adoption, agile, and any new technical skills. And then take those seed teams and propagate them forward and have them pair with other teams. Tool chains, probably hardest decision. The mental gymnastics that we go through, and I see people go through in organizations to decide on tool chains and how they're going to implement them and support them, is probably the long pole in the tent in a DevOps adoption. You got a whole suite of things on the left. You got a saturated market. You have to look at your skill sets. You have to decide, for example, if you're working in an enterprise and you have multiple divisions, you have to decide if you're going to be more of a meritocracy, holacracy. Are you going to support all of this centralized and be a platform? Or are you going to let it be more federated? Do you buy an integrated platform? Or do you buy like a single platform that's already comes integrated, something like GitLab, or do you buy individual tool chains? What I've mostly seen is that the pockets of tool chains live in different parts of the organization, and I see more integration. But I did just work with a company that did go with a fully integrated platform. They didn't feel that they had the engineering skill sets on the inside to really support and integrate a tool chain. And when I talk about enterprise divisional, and I put this slide here because I'm going through this right now. At S&P, we have 4 divisions, and we have then a corporate IT department with networking and infrastructure and other cross-divisional aspects. And each of our lines of business have a tool chain that they like. Some are using Jenkins, some are in GitHub, some are using Azure DevOps and Git. And everybody feels that their tool chain's better than the other, but we're wasting some money. And there's an opportunity to explore whether we want to do an enterprise versus a divisional capability. And this is literally what the CIO is using to make those decisions, and working with the CTOs in each of the divisions to decide what we're going to make common capabilities and that they are going to offer at a federate across the enterprise. This is an example of where we are right now with our tool chain and where we're targeting. It's a lot. We went with the we're going to integrate our own tool chain. We didn't go with a single platform. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of this come together and seeing a developer commit code and go to customer within a matter of a day, rather than it's about 6 weeks right now. So I wanted to share this with you in case you were interested in how a company like S&P is and what they're looking at. What do we start with? Who do we start with? How do we get started? So now you've got the tools, you are skilling your people, you've got the resources. Do we start with a greenfield product team or a legacy that's sitting in an on-prem and we want to re-platform into the cloud. I think we all, other than the tool chain, the other thing that we all get analysis paralysis around is where we're starting and how. This is a tool that I use, a decision analysis, and we just recently used this within my division of where picking a product team, picking a team that we're going to go quote make DevOps, and we're going to embed ops functions into them, and we're going to give them this new tool chain that we have stood up, and we're going to get them to be able to release on demand. And we looked at 3 different teams. 1 was a greenfield product and 2 were legacy products that we're going to migrate out of on-prem and from a physical data center into the cloud. And these are the things that we looked at to make those decisions. Is this product have long-term value? Like, are we investing in this product and that we're committing to it and enhancing it for revenue? Is it a representative tech stack? Like, you know, we're not going to go and I think put a C+ app out there, right? You know, we're going to look at whether it's a Java. We have a lot of .NET at S&P, and that's what we're going to target. And there has to be a high frequency of volume of change. I mean, that's why we're putting this system in. Innovative, high performing team. The team that we're working with has to want this. To be open to change. They need to be learners and willing to fail and work at a consistent pace. And one of the most important things, though this got deprioritized, is that their middle management and their product management is bought in. Product management is really important because if they're the ones prioritizing the backlog, but they're not giving the development of the pipeline or containers or any of that, and they're not giving that any weight in time for the team to do that in the backlog, you will move at a snail's pace. So we wanted to make sure the business was bought in and supportive and creating space and time for the team to do this. We landed on a legacy product, innovative team. We gave them a coach and 2 experts or masters, and we lifted and shifted an app out of the cloud and on-prem and refactored it and put it in through the pipeline. And it was honestly, it was about 3 months until they were rapidly delivering. Do we reorg the teams or change the reporting structure? So one of the conversations that I repeatedly have with organizations is what the true essence or meaning of what DevOps is. And I think it gets forgotten that the core or foundation of DevOps is the elimination of that silo between dev and ops, where you're not having handoffs to ops, and there's not a competing incentives between dev for quality and ops for reliability and stability. But nobody really knows how to make that happen. And we look at a couple of different options of how we can eliminate those silos. And there's 3 options that are, I would say, the most common. There's more, but these are some of the most common. And that's, you know, you got your, what I consider an agile dev team with a dotted line with some ops resources that can automate infrastructure and support them in cross-skilling that would align to their team, but they would still report to a ops manager, potentially creating conflict between priorities from the dev team, and that's the drawback to this one. The second one is the DevOps team. The ops people are embedded, they're sharing a backlog with that team, and that enabler work and tech and maintenance work is in that backlog, but we still haven't changed the reporting structure. So I call this embedded, but with a dotted line. And then the third one is you build it, you own it. This is that, you know, 2-piece team. It's a lot of people equate this to what Amazon does and Facebook and a lot of the startups or tech companies, where it's a full stack, T-shaped engineering team. They develop it, deliver it, operate it. They wear the pager, and they own end to end that application, soup to nuts, cradle to grave, code to customer. Problem is, is if you're in a legacy system and you're a legacy organizational structure, to go to something like number 3 is a pretty drastic emotional change, and can cause, I would say, a lot of strife in an organization. So if we were to do similar to, if you're familiar with HGTV's House Hunters, and we're trying to decide how you wanted to go and start standing up teams to move into a DevOps team topology, some of the decision factors that we look at are, what's going to minimize disruption. Like if you're not willing as a leader to tolerate the disruption to your staff by changing that reporting structure, you probably want to look at 1 or 2. And if you're looking at what's driving collective ownership, one of the key elements of DevOps, you probably want to look at 2 or 3. Optimizing for flow, right? That's where are we going to get the best flow? And then a 4th factor is cognitive load. If we're putting ops functions into a team and we want people to start owning the application end to end and understanding ops and ops understanding dev, it's a lot of cognitive load. And at the same time, if you're adopting Agile, the cloud, DevOps, you might want to consider how that's going to impact your team and how you do roles and responsibilities. I have to say, the company I just worked for, an organization inside that company that was adopting Agile and DevOps, went straight to number 3. You had 2 completely separate siloed, and they said, you know what, we're pulling the Band-Aid off. And they put in a whole support system to help them transition. It was bold, it worked, it was emotional, and I would say that it cut the team forming, norming time in half. So it just depends on the organization and their tolerance. But there is no such thing as the perfect org structure or team topology. I think that's important to remember, but there are such things as bad org structures and topologies. And a siloed org structure, and an org structure that lends itself, if you're familiar with Conway's law, where the application starts to take on the architecture of that communication structure and there's tight coupling, something to really be thinking about as you look to structure around a DevOps culture and organization. Retreat, reset, revisit. So they've got the team, they've got the tools, they're up and running, their operating model, they think they're moving towards being a DevOps organization, but they're not seeing results. So on the right-hand side, if you're familiar with the State of DevOps report that comes out every year, I think now it's put out by Google and the DevOps Research Association. And they have this great table to give you an idea if you're an elite organization or you're not. And if you look at this table and you see yourselves landing still after you've done all of this between low and medium, then it's time to take a step back and ask yourself, okay, what are we doing? Do we bail, or do we need a reset, or do we need to revisit our strategy? And some of the questions you might ask are on the left-hand side. I would say one of the things that really, really holds teams or organizations from truly being able to adopt DevOps is leadership changes and org changes, and going and doing an acquisition and directing resources to the expansion of the business. So there's a lot of reasons to set organizations back, but I would say reorgs and leadership changes are the 2 main contributing factors. So don't stop, don't retreat, just adjust your expectations. The company that I was just at for 4 years, they just every year had success criteria that they had established, and by the time they wanted to establish, and they just changed the year and they owned it and said, you know what, we're not there yet, but we're still on that journey and we'll get there. So I think the most important decision to make is to commit to this. If you've read the Phoenix Project or you're familiar with Gene Kim and his 3 ways, I think it's flow, feedback, I forget what the 3rd one is. There's another 3 ways. To me, it's persist, perspire, and persevere. And you gotta push through the change, but in order to push through that change, you got to remember your why. Why are you doing this? Is it for the market disruption? Is it for your people, humane IT? And then I would suggest having your success criteria defined to know where you are on that journey. This is the success criteria that I have established and I have used with organizations to put a stake in the ground and say, we are a DevOps organization with a DevOps culture. And it's collective ownership, the essence of DevOps, for that quality, reliability, availability, and performance for its full life cycle. That these teams can rapidly experiment and release high quality software at any pace and any time without disruption. And they can restore the application and its environment with a single command. And that concludes my presentation. I think I did okay with the 20 minutes, or did I go over?
No, that was great. Thank you very much, Aimee. So we've got a couple of questions. The first one from Anthony. So how often do you see companies try to do like partial DevOps implementations? So much like companies do partial agile adoptions. And how often do you see these succeed in your experience?
That's a good question. I see pockets within companies of teams that are full-on agile in DevOps, and then I see pockets where they're not. So that doesn't give you a single answer, and you're going to see this anywhere. You're just going to see pockets of maturity and levels of adoption different across teams. Every team, every org has its own culture even.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. And another one is, how difficult is it to get business buy-in to almost transfer to DevOps? And do you think the size of the company or what the company does makes a difference? And in your experience, which companies are best suited to a DevOps adoption, or where would you find the most resistance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because that's a loaded question. The companies that I see who will lend themselves to DevOps are ones that are younger, with less legacy, less acquisitions, the ones that are willing to convert their talent and take the risk. And when it's coming from the top down. When it's coming from the CEO and the CIO, you're pretty much guaranteed that there's a commitment there and they're successful. The companies that I have seen struggle are the ones like I described, with the legacy, leadership changes, not willing to put in the time and effort. The product management, the business, I see this as a real struggle. Product managers in the business don't want to slow down feature development, and they're incentivized on it. So if your product manager isn't giving the team the time to invest in enable work or reducing tech debt, it'll be very difficult and you won't be successful. It is rare. They're the rare gems of product managers of the business that want DevOps and want to do this.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Aimee. Any more questions for Aimee, do put them on the Q&A section. Aimee will be able to answer them as the other talks continue. But up next is Carlos from Nutmeg talking about Grafana 7. So thank you very much, Aimee. And Carlos,
thank you.
Up.
Hey everyone, I'm going to share my screen now. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. Cool. So I'm going to talk about Grafana 7 and what has bring into this game of observability. I've been using Grafana for a long time, almost since I started using Kubernetes, Prometheus, and all this ecosystem of metrics and containers and schedulers. Everything is ephemeral. So on this release has brought some very, very interesting features. So first of all, let's talk about the observability pillars. I guess everybody is roughly already familiar with this Martin Fowler's definition of these pillars. Metrics, tracing, and logging, they all have something in common, a little bit of overlap between them, but they have a different scope, a different context to gather information about the systems, your applications, what's going on over there. So if we go into metrics, and this is only from my experience and the tools I use, I don't advocate for any particular implementation. This can be translated to anything else. So this is, for example, a dashboard from Grafana, and this is how I visualize metrics and how I see things. All this comes from Prometheus. This is how we gather metrics, we collect them, and this is just a measurement of the state of the systems or your applications. Doesn't give you very, very detailed information about things. It's just a way to flag that there is something going on, good or bad, or just to measure the performance of your systems. And then we have logs, which will be the oldest of all the pillars that we know already. I have gone through many of them. These are different stacks to collect and visualize logs. Everyone collects the logs and centralize them. It's the easier way to know where things or what things are happening. And you don't want to run through all different systems, different ways of accessing your logs and having to remember all the different ways of doing it. You centralize them, you visualize them, and you have only one way of getting them and querying them. This is just, again, an example. This is Grafana. You collect them, you have an index, you can filter them by fields, just way of doing things. So again, this is just another way. This gives you a little bit more context. You can see previous steps, next steps after the error, if you're looking for errors. But again, it doesn't allow you to do these mathematical operations that, for example, metrics will be able to do. And then we have traces, maybe the most unknown of the three pillars. So basically, traces give you a little bit of context on what a request is doing through the whole system. And this obviously comes with a little bit of, you have to pay the price of instrumenting your tools or adding some interceptors or other toolings. On my experience, I have been using open tracing for a long time, particularly Zipkin. Another tool that has implemented open tracing is Jaeger. This is from Uber. But then open tracing has joined to Open Census, which is an implementation from Google, and they have become Open Telemetry. They deliver some instrumentation middleware, so you have metrics and traces out of the box without having to do anything into your source code, theoretically. At the end of the day, you have to do some bits and bobs. So this is how traces look like. So you have different components. You can identify them by colors on the Jaeger UI. Then you can see a request, which things are doing. You can see parallel requests, serial requests, and if, well, depending how you annotate them, you will be able to see, for example, here there are some errors. But this, again, comes with the price that you have to instrument your systems. And then, obviously, this becomes the most useful thing when there's a problem. So normally, what I have been doing on the past years is I have an alerting system that comes with Prometheus. This alerting normally posts into a messaging tool, Mattermost or Slack or any other TeamCity or whatever you want to use for direct messaging. And that triggers some actions. That triggers an investigation. What's happening? First step, I normally go into the dashboards, see what's happening with my app. If I don't have any dashboards, I might go directly into running some queries into my Prometheus servers and see what is roughly happening, has been happening for a long time, has been just a spike. And then I go into the metrics and see, oh, what actually happened on this particular problem on these metrics. And if you're lucky enough and you have traces, you could see, oh, this happened when the requests go through this path, and then you eventually can implement a fix and run through all the process of the incident response. And then roughly a couple of months ago, during the Grafana Con, I started listening or hearing about what the Grafana 7 can do now. And it has been really, really interesting, and really, I'm really happy to see those features implemented, because there was a need of that. So now Grafana 7, this is not implemented yet. So it allows you to go from metrics to traces. So you go into your Grafana dashboard and you can click somewhere, and then you will see the traces. And then you click somewhere else and you will see the logs. And this is very powerful, because I don't have to go through 3 different UIs and trying to correlate timestamps, IDs, and other bits. Normally metrics and logs don't come at the same time. So they're collected differently. They have well, different nature. And again, traces could be more trustful, but again, depending on your login systems and how you configure them. So this is where the demo starts. First time I'm doing a demo, so wish me luck. I'm going to talk a little bit about what tools I have been using for the demo. You can see something, well, basically this is Kubernetes based. First of all, I have been using Kind, which is Kubernetes in Docker implementation, Minikube, which is a virtual machine with Docker, Bash, Helm, Grafana Loki, Grafana server to visualize them. And for this purpose, Jaeger, because it consumes much little memory and is running on my laptop. Zipkin is Java, but I have the most experience with Zipkin. And I will share this later, but there is a URL that you will be able to get all this from the repository. I'm still working on this, so don't look at it now. Let's go to the demo. Cool. So you can see I have Grafana deployment. I have all this is running on my local laptop. And I have 3 little dashboards over here. This is actually, this looks like this. I'm using just how Jaeger recommends to deploy things. This is all running into my little script. Using Helm to install Prometheus with some custom properties. Loki, Promptail, which is one of the tools to forward logs into Loki. And then a little app that I have built to instrument and see how things go into Grafana. This translates roughly into this. And this is a very, very simple dashboard I have implemented for the app I'm developing. Over here, there is a heat map with the distribution of requests that has been successful, and the latency. So the app I have implemented has a random timeout or random delay on the requests, and randomly will also reply with a 500 error. It also do recursive calls to itself, depending, again, randomly tries to call itself and randomly replies with one call or another. Over here, you can see the distribution of the number of errors that have been recorded on the logs. This is coming from Loki, which is a logging system, aggregation list system, very powerful. I really like it. I discovered it only a couple of months ago. And it's just basically like grep, and it's great. It's much easier and lightweight than other tools I have been using. And it also allows you to do aggregations like this, which is great because you can even set alarms on Grafana for these kind of things. So going back, this is the distribution for my 500s that you will be able to see here and over here. Then we have some Grafana metrics with some errors over here, 502s, because I have deployed a broken Prometheus data source. Everything is broken, some logs are generated, and some metrics are pushed as well. Not a big deal. So all this is just metrics, which again is one of the ways of visualizing one of the 3 pillars, but it's as easy as doing this for me to add a new panel with logs. Here we go. And now I can see the logs from my Grafana deployment. And I can see, well, because this is Promtail knows about the logs formats, and it can recognize that this is an error. It will highlight that this is an error. And it's awesome to be able to see that I have, not there, not there. Yes, here. This is great to be able to see that I have 500 errors over here, and I have a correlation with those errors over there. And when I filter my metrics, all these logs are filtered at the same time, so I don't have to spend time correlating what that spike on my metrics means on my logs. It's all done for you. One of the other features that Grafana has is the Explore tab, which is over here, but you can navigate from the dashboard into there, and you will be able to see this fantastic distribution with the colors, seeing errors and successful entries on the logs. And you can see signatures if there is any repetition of the logs. There you go. There's some duplicated entries. And also something that is very useful, not on that one, this one, no. Okay, there is no a correlation on these ones with the traces, which is unfortunate. So Grafana needs a little bit more instrumentation on the logs to be able to do that. But luckily, we have the app that have quickly developed to see this. So let's explore all these errors and see what happens. This is a little problem when you navigate from a metrics dashboard into the Explore tab. It doesn't recognize that you just want the logs. but sometimes it does a very good job filtering and creating the query directly for you. There you go. All of them are reds because they are all errors. Well, basically everything's broken because I'm filtering by that field over there. Also, something awesome on these logs is when you are filtering them, you can see the context of that error entry above and below the entry. So these are errors, but these are also info entries, and you can see them and you can expand them. You can load more if you want. You want to see more forward or backwards on that entry. But what I want to see, what I want to show you is this little bit. So I have identified a field. I know they are the traces, and I'm parsing that, and I'm creating a new field. So that field is this one, but I have extracted it and make a link to Jaeger. And that just opens a tab on the side, and it pings me directly into that dashboard, into that trace, which is great. This is a little bit of a bug on Jaeger UI at the moment, which keeps growing. And you can see this is my ping pong app that's very annoying. My ping pong app that randomly returns 500s and keeps doing internal calls, recursive calls, and then all of a sudden just crashes and goes back. So if we close this one, you can see it a little bit better, the trace. But it's great. It's great just the fact that I can go from logs or from metrics into logs into traces with a single UI, and everything is condensed in here. So this is basically the same UI as you will be able to see on, oh, I cannot hit that. Oh, oof. There we go. That's Jaeger UI. So you will be able to do the same if you go over there. Okay, it's not working now. Yay, it's a demo. Shouldn't be, should fail from now and then. But yeah, this is basically what you can do. You can create graphs with logs. You can have the logs alongside with your apps, metrics. You can visualize them. You can go directly into the Explore tab, which is fantastic. You can create splits and have more metrics over there. You can just swap into log. Yeah, show me the logs directly over there. All these times frames are locked, so you can actually filter here and will automatically filter the logs over there. It makes the developers' lives so much easier thanks to all this tooling. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to share with you. So thank you, and we'll take a look to the Q&A. Let's see if I. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carlos. So the one question's come through, and that is, once upgrading to Grafana 7, is it possible to have mixed content on a dashboard in terms of some charts being connected to a tracing/logging module and other graphs being independent?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will have to see the example you're mentioning, but you can connect, I mean, you can have any kind of combinations. You don't have to filter, well, so if you want to, if I understand this correctly, you can have a dashboard with tracing, logging, and what, metrics. as far as I have seen and investigated, you cannot visualize traces on normal dashboards. You can only see them through the Explore tab or the Explore feature. But I guess that's something that will be coming pretty soon, hopefully.
Great, thank you very much. So that's all the questions for now. As with most talks with live demos, the questions normally come flooding in afterwards. So if you do have a question, do feel free to write it on the Q&A section, and Carlos will be happy to answer that. So up next, though, thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, we have Mika from Smarkets talking about turning audit pains to operating pleasures. So Mika, if you want to take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my shed. And as soon as I get the screen shared inside my head, should be that one. Should be that. Cool. Okay. So to start with, I'm trying out a couple of new techniques, which I think should work nicely when doing online. Usually I do my talks live. No one has really figured it out yet, so I'll try to get myself ahead of the pack. So welcome to figuring out how to turn audit pains into something more pleasurable. And usually on all live talks, every speaker hides the next slide at the end of the talk. I'll bring it up front. Yes, we are hiring. Doesn't come as a surprise. Let's get it over with. Come talk to me later. Quickly about the company. We are a betting exchange, and with that comes regulatory hurdles and headaches like nothing else. We also do real-time trading, which then comes with accounting rules. And because we are an exchange and a gambling company, we hold on to customer funds. All of those combine in isolation. Our auditing headaches as such already, combine them, and you have a very particular mix of toxic brew. The customers mostly care about reliability, latency, and availability. Real-time trading, someone else's money, of course it makes sense. Regulators, on the other hand, they care about responsible gambling, accuracy and fairness, so that the trades we are made actually are matched correctly and they are paid out correctly. They care about money laundering, or more to the point, not having it. We are in an industry where money laundering is a rampant problem, and any avenue of fraud will be used to siphon off money from victims to somewhere else. And they finally care about security. And if you notice, there is a small asterisk, because like everything in regulation world, they work off of a checklist, which is usually about a decade out of date. And about me, I respond to many names, including hey you. I tend to worry about the workflow, in particular how can we get work done so that things get ahead, and also that anything that's coming off of compliance land impacts workflow and engineering as little as possible. And that's why I try to keep things sane. And sort of a background, last year, I spent full 25% of my entire work time either babysitting or appeasing auditors. So those of you who know this, where this is going, it feels, as in all of those time, it feels like this. You are being bent backwards to satisfy the desires of a machine which you don't understand and that has been built to no purpose you can really figure out. But you have to fit in, and it hurts. Right. I think Ashley promised to set up a Q&A, so I'm going to return to this one at the end of the talk. So if you were live, I would ask you a show of hands. In here, I ask you to just click yes or no. I'll see the numbers at the end. So if you are affected directly, or if you have to spend time either babysitting the people who are auditing you, or anything that comes off of them affects your own work, this is for you. And also, anyone who actually spends time on this knows that the questions that you get asked, they very much, they feel the same. So all the time, it feels a bit like this. A Groundhog Day, where you experience the same life, same day over and over again. And only small things change. No matter what you do, things are slightly different. And once you have the audit finally done, you get a report, which looks if all things are realistic, something like this. You have various findings across various categories of different severities. And if you were to work on this, on an item by item, one by one, line by line approach, you would end up spending your life basically doing something like this. So working with findings on a one by one basis is a bit like playing whack-a-mole continuously, where the best case scenario is that some observer from the outside derives some pleasure from it. So instead, what usually happens, you can identify that there are various items that actually are different angles of one and the same thing. And we'll return to this one. So once we actually start to work on this, I'll give you an example, a real example from our system. So this is a recurring pain point. So if you have dealt with auditor or audits in general, one question that comes up every time again and again is asset register. And fine, it works wonderfully for hardware, but do you really have an up-to-date list of all your VMs? I don't think so. Especially if we're on any kind of modern stack, VMs come and go. They are transient and they are supposed to go away. Your asset register is actually the scaling definition, which is live, but auditors and regulators don't really understand that yet. So what you end up doing is effectively telling them that while they have heard about immutable infrastructure and auto scaling, they don't really understand it. So especially in our industry and almost any industry, regulations tend to be out by a decade, and people who are writing the rules don't really understand the cloud at all. They barely understand the internet, to be fair, but cloud is even trickier. On the other hand, the bright side is that auditors love code reviews, although for the wrong reasons. We do it to improve code quality and to improve engineering culture and code behavior. They see a wonderful manifestation of cover your backside behavior and finger pointing records. Not a good idea. So we have to educate them. The thing is, as I mentioned earlier, solving this in isolation would be counterproductive. So let's not do that. Another one. So the question which comes up again as well is host patch management. How do you keep your hosts up to date? Always, how do you ensure it? How do you prove it? How do you monitor this? How do you ensure that there are no known vulnerabilities or problems in the fleet? Yeah. At this point, it should be obvious, but there is a clear solution to both of these questions, which actually makes life for you and engineering teams you work with much easier. Since we already mentioned that we have immutable infra and scaling systems, let's put the aggressive views. Scale systems up as you need and scale them down aggressively. You know that the oldest ones will die out and the new ones come in. So what happens is that you get effectively a continuous stream of new systems. Combine this with daily updates. Whatever you have there baking comes up with all the latest upgrades installed. So when you get a new system in, it's fresh and it's secure and it's good and it's happy. And anything that's going out, you know that it was already out of date. You don't have to care about it. It gives your window of vulnerability really down, and it's really easy to explain. And here's the thing, the third point is that you can actually educate auditors. They do understand the concepts, and once you explain that it is like reinstalling a system on demand every 5 minutes as you want, they figure it out. And also emphasize to them that modifying a live system, patching a host once it's been launched, is in fact a bad smell, or even an anti-pattern. And when I mentioned that we are aiming for pleasure, a fleet that operates on these principles enforces that any application there must live with the fact that hosts are transient. They must handle failures and failovers and retries correctly. This is kind of service which we all aim for and all gloss about. These are the kinds of things we read on blog posts. But this is something that actually, it doesn't need to be black magic or anything else. And again, auditors wouldn't be auditors if they weren't asking the questions that you already heard. So the thing is, snapshots from a web console don't work. Don't even try. As we just saw on dashboards, we all have bird's eye views into production. We all know what the fleet is doing. So why not show median and max age for hosts? In fact, a real example of our system is that the median age of our CI fleet systems is less than 36 hours. So that's a pretty good goal. And once you have these numbers up somewhere, if the max age starts to creep up so that it's embarrassing, either okay, I want to cycle that manually, or even better, figure out how to take the manual step out and make your own life even easier. And if you remember just one thing from this talk, let it please be a single soundbite. Correct amount of host configuration is 0. And I do mean 0. Don't touch them. Right, back to auditors. They love reports. We love data and we love good service. Auditors want to see records of everything. And anyone who works on this deals with audit trails all the time. For them, it's raw material. For us, it's more like something we drown into. And it is decidedly not a fun thing to experience. But where does the data to those trails come from? So here I'm going to show my hubris. I haven't seen this written down anywhere else, so I did it. I claim, and I'm putting my name to this, any data that is used only in audit reports is absolutely useless. So, easy rule of thumb, don't generate any data for just satisfy compliance and audit needs. They are leaf systems and they are effectively orphans. If you have data that is only going to report that is never read, no one cares about it. If it's data that someone actually cares about, you have an incentive to fix it as soon as things go wild. And solution is pretty trivial. So anything that goes into reports that you need to maintain synthesizes from real data. Something you actually actively need to use or someone needs to use. So when it breaks, you'll know it. And also when eventually you need to dig the reports out, you won't be doing it in a mad rush. And there is an upside to this. If there is some data that you absolutely need and you need to provide reports for, try to find some way of making it useful so that somebody cares about it. And here's the thing, it's actually harder than you think because I can't help you. I don't know your business, only you do. It has to be something that is basically only custom made for your business needs, your organization, your engineers, your workflow. I'm sure there are consultants who will happily come in, charge big money and tell you things you already knew, but if you are using them, you may want to question something. Maybe your choices in life, or at least your sanity. And if we have the poll results from Ashley, cool. Do I have numbers?
We do. We have 43% said that their work is directly affected by auditors and their results, and 57% said no. So they're the lucky ones.
Okay, thank you. So slightly less than half of the 70-odd people who are still left in the audience, you actually have experienced this, and the 60% of you, as in you get to know the kind of pain you now can avoid, and also why, when something comes in your way from outside of the company, why it's being shoveled your way at all. So if you can enjoy life without it, enjoy while you can. So in a nutshell, this as a treat compliance and audits as an engineering problem. When something fails in production, we don't massage the symptoms. We go for the jugular. We find the root cause and fix that one. Same way we can do that when they are identified issues from audits and audit reports identify the underlying cause and fix that. Usually you end up ticking a whole bunch of boxes out. Don't repeat yourself. Keep it dry. So whatever data is going to one place, and try to reuse it. Simply because if you have to build a new source of truth for some purpose, it's unlikely that someone else cares about it. So use what is available and only build new stuff where you absolutely have to. And then if you are dealing with an organization where you don't have much of a say normally, there's a silver lining. Anything coming off of regulators and auditors has potential to really make your life miserable. Not just for you, but for everyone in the company. So if you can find an underlying reason and you know that there is a solution or an approach which will address that, and at the same time make engineering life easier, more sane, more palatable, and overall make it easier to actually get your work done, go for it. That's your selling point. Cost of compliance is real if you can reduce cost of compliance by making engineering life better. The uptake and sellability should be pretty high. And as I said in the beginning, or a few minutes ago, if you remember nothing else from this talk, please remember this one. Correct amount of host config which you want to aim for is flat 0. Thank you.